Hello, Pittsburgh. I'm Zac Gibson, and this is Trib Lives from the Newsroom podcast, bringing you top stories from TribLive.com. Are you saving for retirement? It's a question that gets a range of answers, especially across different age groups in the United States. Some think it's too early to start, and others believe it's never too soon. But among millennials and Gen Z, one trend stands out: a significant gap in financial literacy. In fact, researchers at the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center at George Washington University say many young Americans lack even the most basic financial knowledge. So, TribLive reporter Haley Daugherty explored this topic. She spoke with financial experts and with 21-year-old Michael Weleski, a young man who's already spent nearly a decade earning and strategically investing his income to build a secure financial future. Today, Haley joins me to talk about Michael's story, to examine financial planning trends among young people, and to share some practical advice for starting your own financial planning journey. Hi, Haley. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Zach.
Let's start with the big picture. I'm going to use some of the data that you provided over the course of your story and help show the overall state of young financial literacy in America. So, data tracking the millennials, those between the ages of 29 and 44, it shows that they currently exhibit the lowest financial literacy of any generation, with only 1 in 4 demonstrating a basic understanding of financial matters, which obviously is not ideal for any generation or situation. So that was a recent study done by Personal Capital Fund, and they found that only 8% are considered highly financially literate, 30% have overdrawn their checking accounts recently, 42% used alternative financial services in the last 5 years, including payday loans, pawn shops, or auto title loans, and more than 20% with retirement accounts have borrowed from them or took out hardship withdrawals in the last year. Now, with Gen Z, those are ages 13 to 28, a 2023 survey by Saxo, an online investment platform, found that 44% said they don't invest due to limited funds, and only 29% have a retirement account. So, Haley, this clearly isn't the most encouraging financial landscape for younger Americans, but I want to shed a little bit more light on some of the inhibiting factors at play here. So, as of 2025, 36 states require some form of personal finance instruction for high school graduation, and this is up from 21 in 2020. But those requirements and the depth of that curriculum varies widely from state to state, or even from school to school, according to Washington Post. Now, Gen Z for FinLit or financial literacy says that many states integrate financial content lightly into their other subjects rather than offering dedicated courses, and only a subset mandate a standalone semester-long class. I remember in my own high schooling, I had a financial literacy class that lasted maybe half of a quarter, so only about 1/8 of my year was learning about financial literacy. Even where courses exist, the teacher qualifications vary. So some educators aren't really as well prepared to teach these types of classes as others. According to MarketWatch, teens and young adults are increasingly exposed to credit cards, BNPL services, student loans, and trading apps, often without sufficient guidance, consistently younger and more frequently. So for Gen Z, credit card debt is common, with about 25% of college students carrying over $1,000 in credit card balances. Now, for the older side of these Gen Z millennial groups, many of them entered adulthood around the time of the 2008 recession. There were stagnant wages, high student debt, and housing unaffordability caused a lot of uncertainty and stress around the concept of financial planning. So all of these different factors really played into a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of structuring, and a lack overall of financial know-how for these two generations. So, while researching this piece, you found someone in this age group who's clearly staving off that trend. Tell me about Michael Weleski, the young man who said he's been working since he was 12 and thinking about financial security for almost just as long. What set him on this path?
Absolutely. So, Michael was really interesting to speak to because I do admit before starting into this story, I was one of those people, and I still am. I'm not claiming to be any type of expert, but I was definitely one of those people who was financially illiterate, and I had no idea where to start. And it was one of the reasons that I wanted to do this story, that I pitched it, and that I wanted to really delve into what everything means. Because if somebody were to look at me and say, "What is an index fund?" I don't know, but thanks to talking to the experts and doing the research, and especially talking to Michael, like, I was able to learn a lot while writing this piece, and a lot of the interviews taught me a lot. And Michael, like you introduced him, he's only 21 years old, and he's currently attending Penn State, New Kensington. He is originally from Plum, and he said that he was really inspired at a young age to save money. He said his grandfather immigrated from Italy to America, and he just said that he watched his grandfather do hard labor until he was 70. And while he made it very clear that he really appreciates the sacrifices his grandfather made, and really admired the hard work that he watched his grandfather do over the years, it just inspired him to learn to save early and to make sure that he could afford his future family the same opportunities his grandfather gave their family, but also being able to relax a little in his older years, be able to retire. So that really set him on his path. One of his quotes that really stood out to me that I included in the article, Weleski said he had nothing, and I saw how he had to work every day for money. It was a very sweet story, and it really did put the train in motion. Currently, Weleski, he's earning his accounting degree, and he said that is helping him become more financially literate. He said that the real dream, the real passion is to one day maybe open his own business, but he wants to make sure that he is as prepared as possible for any type of future investments or any type of future work that in money management he'll be charged with as a business owner.
Okay, so it seems like he's already gotten started with trying to gain some experience himself.
For anyone who's listening, he is way ahead of the curve. This is not any type of, "Oh, I'm behind." You're never too behind to start investing. In fact, you can truly start at any age. There are a lot of great resources to start, but specifically Weleski, he is currently invested in 3 different index funds. The first one is an S&P 500 index fund. That is probably the most common index fund that people use, and it's also one of the quicker ways to immediately diversify someone's financial portfolio, because it's a market index that measures the performance of 500 of the largest publicly traded companies in the US. So in that S&P 500 index fund, it is immediately spread out amongst those businesses, and you can easily track it through either an app or an investment firm, whatever you use, whatever entity you use to invest in that, you're able to track. He also has an international business index fund and a bond index fund. So, and then even more so, in an attempt to diversify his portfolio a little bit, Weleski put a little of his money into cryptocurrency, and then in the future, he's hoping to start investing in real estate someday. He said that that was one of the big goals that he was hoping to reach.
Okay, so it seems like he really has his mind on getting himself a firm, diverse foundation so that he can expand on that as he continues his educational and professional career. Now, I also read in your story that even when he's not actively working on a investment that he is part of, he is still trying to learn about financial literacy in different ways. Can you tell me about how he likes to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So he told me that he began learning about his personal finances when he turned 18. He reads about different types of investment opportunities, either in the news or in some type of business publication. He said he also really took a lot of advice from his uncle, who is another small business owner. He said that he learned a lot from that mentorship mentor position that his uncle took over for him. He said that he really trusts him to lead him in the right direction, which is really truly an invaluable resource to have if someone is interested in beginning to invest. And then he
Absolutely.
said that even when he's driving around or doing something else, he's listening to business podcasts. His favorite is Diary of a CEO. And he said while that podcast doesn't strictly just speak about financial investments, it does cover a really broad range of topics for someone who is interested in going into some type of business ownership in the future.
Okay. Well, at the top of this section of our conversation, you mentioned that Weleski is obviously ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
And for listeners who want to be more financially proactive but don't really know where to start, can you give a little bit of the advantage of being ahead of the curve?
So Weleski mentioned that he also has a 401k account through the accounting firm that he interns for. And then he also has a Roth IRA account, which is an individual retirement account that offers that tax-free growth and tax-free withdrawals after retirement. He said that he contributes the maximum amounts allowed by law each year. So for 2025, that amount is $7,000 for people under 50 and $8,000 for people who are 50 and older. A person who works in an office job or has some type of salaried position, they oftentimes are offered the option to begin investing in a 401k through their job. As an example, a 25-year-old who contributes $500 a month to a 401k that's earning 4% annually would end up with nearly $630,000 by retirement at age 67. These were numbers from Forbes. But if that same person waited until age 45 to start saving that same amount, they'd have less than $210,000, a third of the total. So it definitely helps to give yourself a little grace, a chance for that money to really build up. And over the years, that way you have a bit more of a safety net when you're ready to be done working. So a lot of places, even if you just do something as quick as Googling, you can find a lot of resources that give different benchmarks. So T. Rowe Price, they say by age 40, you should have saved twice your annual income, by 50, 5 times your income, and by 60, 9 times.
Thank you for giving a little bit of a layout for a general overview for goals to shoot for if you're just now getting into financial planning. But you also took the time to seek out some career experts, like one David Root. He was the founder and CEO of DBR & Co., a financial management firm. So he shared his own tips for getting started as a financial planning newcomer. Can you tell me about your conversation?
Speaking to David was extremely helpful because you hear all these different terms and your head starts to spin and then you get a little dizzy and you're just like, I need to go lay down. I can't think about dollar signs anymore.
Right.
But he was incredibly helpful. He did say something that really stuck out to me, which was talk to people, talk to other investors, talk to someone that you trust about your money. Find someone that you could view almost as a mentor, which I know I referenced that phrase, especially at the beginning when I was speaking about Weleski and his uncle. I found that very interesting that he had done that on his own without really having to reach out and just say, where do I start? So I thought that was really interesting. And, Mr. Root, he acknowledged the dizzy spell that I mentioned earlier. And he did say the biggest challenge is getting started and sticking with it. He compared it to definitely starting a diet, learning a skill, and it's just about consistent habits. And he definitely called getting started in the investment arena a critical point in someone's financial journey. Good habits, some examples just include a base for investing, such as having a savings account to start with, and then a small rainy day fund for emergencies. He said that rainy day fund or a savings account, a rainy day fund should have enough money to be able to cover a small health emergency, or say you're driving and your engine falls out of your car, be able to have the money to pay for that tow and get your car fixed. Have something for those high priced emergencies that we really, fingers crossed, hope doesn't happen. And then in a savings account, if someone is saving for a new car or saving for a down payment on a house, have that in your savings account. And once you have both of those set up, you're good to go with starting to invest. And that still may leave people saying, okay, I have this money, now what? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And Root said that his firm actually is helping young investors learn skills because it is becoming more and more of a high demand from his regular clients who are having children and they want their kids to know. And it's also for just local young people who don't really know where to start. It's called the Next program, and it is a consulting option that was developed specifically for young people and teaching them how to get started. And he said that it's really, since as the demand has really gone up, it's like one of the fastest growing parts of his business. He said another risk of people getting started is people just becoming almost obsessed with the market or afraid of the market. And he said that the Next program, they're like coaches, to help build their players or their clients like
Right.
confidence and throwing their money into uncharted territory almost, except he did, emphasize that it is, chartered territory. There's nothing to be afraid of. If you become obsessed with the market, then it will drive you crazy, and
Right.
investing will no longer be fun. So it was really interesting getting to hear about that program a lot. And then another thing he mentioned was just research. He likened it to a new medication. You're never gonna just take a new medication without looking into what it does, what the
Right.
side effects are. Look into the type of fund or index fund or bond or Roth IRA. Look into what you want to put your money in. Look at what those risk reward levels are. Make sure you're prepared for what that can do for your money. Just look into it.
So one thing I saw before I move on to our next professional, for people looking to figure out whether or not they are the person that's ready to start looking into these types of services, Root said if someone is able to save for more than a year into the future and is able to look 2 to 5 years down the road, then they can begin to think about investing.
Mm-hmm.
Akin Sayrak was another seasoned source in the education of finance for this story.
Mm-hmm.
As a clinical assistant professor of business administration at the University of Pittsburgh, Akin said there are a few ways to improve one's financial literacy and that doing so could be essential to retirement planning. So can you tell me about why it could be essential?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Sayrak was another professional that really emphasized the importance of research and knowing what you're doing with your money.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that you can do that through formal classes like night classes or reading literature, or he even mentioned listening to podcasts
Mm-hmm.
as well. There is just a plethora of ways to make sure that you are receiving the correct information and useful information. And he did point out that while most people will receive Social Security once they retire, its payments won't cover the cost of their daily expenditures. So
Right.
it helps to have that extra investment, or like I called it before, that extra safety net to make sure that you're taken care of.
Absolutely. Zooming out for a second, looking at the current state of Social Security, according to the Washington Post, Social Security funds could run dry earlier than they were previously forecast to have run dry.
Mm-hmm.
According to some trustees, if Congress does not overhaul financing, automatic cuts could slash Social Security benefits by 23% in 2033.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even a decade away. So according to the latest trustee report, the OASI and DI funds, which are separate funds under the law, but to illustrate the type of coverage realistically that would happen after these funds, they are accounted as a whole. So the hypothetical OASDI funds that would be normally scheduled to pay 100% of their benefits, by the time these cuts happen, these combined funds will become depleted and only be able to continue fulfilling their scheduled payments to 79%, which means not everybody's going to be able to receive the amount that they planned or expected to receive, pointing to the safety net being a little bit more necessary now than it seemingly ever has been. So as Sayrak said, they'll need to be supplemental in their savings to have to pull from after retirement, and that's going to come from their independent retirement accounts. So can you tell me a little bit more about your conversation with Dr. Zac.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to go over quick numbers, according to the Social Security Administration website, right now, as of January, the estimated average benefit amount is around $1,976 per month, but that amount does change monthly. And the earlier someone starts saving for retirement, just the better odds they have of being able to cover their needs in their retirement years. He really did emphasize the importance of just having that resource.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now we're getting close to the end of our conversation, but there's something we haven't really touched on that I think concerns and even holds back a lot of young and older people from getting into planning for their financial future. And that is the acknowledgement of risk.
Mm-hmm.
So was there any information that Professor Zac explained to help provide some insight and maybe even a little comfort on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. He was very understanding of how intimidating the market can be to get into and how intimidating it can be to separate from your money, you know? And his advice was really to start small. Start by dipping your toe in, do your research, and then start with a small amount of money. One thing that he did say was just understand that higher risk investments, that typically means just the potential for higher returns. Higher risk, higher reward. It's just what are you willing to put up with? And that also leans on David Root's advice to not become obsessed, because if you watch the market every day, you watch that up and down, it's very easy to become anxious, and understandably so. He also advised to adjust the risk tolerance with age. So more examples of higher risk investments. Growth stocks are considered high risk just due to market volatility, and then corporate bonds and cash are seen as moderate and low risk. As investors get older and they become a little bit more experienced and they peak in their career, they should definitely shift toward more secure investments. One ratio that Dr. Zac recommended was a 70-30 high to low risk ratio to start out with. And again, that 70-30% just comes from the money you're using for your investment. You still have your savings account and your rainy day fund. Right. That's out of the equation for now. And then once you get to that mid-career point, you want to aim for a 50-50 split as much as you can. And that can be, and again, the form of some type of stock investment and then some type of bond investment, which is a bit more common of what people see today. And then people getting closer to retirement, you want to reverse that original ratio, move all the way down to 30% in the high risk category, and then bump all the way up to 70% in your low risk category. And listeners may be saying, well, if it's so high risk, why even bother with the stock market? If people can start early, why only do low risk? The stock market offers a really unique perspective into money that a lot of people don't get, you know? He said that some people grow up and they are entrepreneurs. They deal with high risk every day whenever they start a new investment plan, a new business, things along those lines. And he said that the stock market really gives that experience to everybody. It gives everyone the opportunity to participate in a similar activity, but definitely a lower level of risk. And he recommends starting with small investments to limit risk while learning and just gradually increasing involvement as people get more comfortable and as their knowledge grows.
Okay. Well, Haley, thank you for coming on to help explain the current young outlook for financial planning. Tell us a little bit about Michael and give us some interesting and insightful tips for those who want to get started on their own.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining. If you enjoyed this week's episode, share the podcast to help keep Western PA locally informed with insightful discussion and the latest news from your area. It's an easy way to spread the word, and it helps our podcast reach more people like you. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and turn on episode notifications so you never miss new content. Once again, I'm Zac Gibson, and this is From the Newsroom.